right now. So welcome everyone to our Community in Action event for July. For those who are new to ARC, the Anti-Racism Commitment Coalition is a coalition of dedicated people committed to eradicating racism and spreading anti-racism throughout our communities, countries, and the world. We're very grateful to have Blake Washington back with us in the resources group. And today she's going to be sharing some stories about a little bit about colorism, what it is, and we're hoping to have a great discussion about things that we've experienced or noticed and how we can find ways within our own communities to combat colorism. So once again, I'm going to turn it over to Blake.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. I want to have a really healthy and strong dialogue and conversation. But before we get started, there's a video about 5 minutes that I want to share of a TED Talk on the topic of colorism. And then I wanted to share some personal experiences that I've actually had when it comes to colorism, as well as some kind of not surprising, but unfortunate statistics when we look at colorism in the world. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully there's no delay.
Looks good.
And hopefully the sound matches. So we'll watch this for a few minutes.
Hello, everybody. Before I begin, I would like to offer a slight disclaimer. This topic is a little bit sensitive in nature because I will be addressing a social issue. It's not my intention to offend anyone or portray any group in a negative manner. I would simply like to call attention to a problem faced by such a large part of our population. So, a quick show of hands. How many of you have never dealt with an insecurity in your life?
Have you checked in?
That's pretty rare, isn't it? And it can be hard to contend with, to face the parts of you that make you feel less attractive, less intelligent, less competent. Well, growing up, I had a lot of difficulty in accepting myself. I was told both explicitly and more subtly that dark skin was unattractive. Relatives and friends would provide me with skin bleaching creams, tell me to stay out of the sun, and just give me any multitude of home remedies to correct the brownness of my skin. When it was time to go out or take pictures, I would be offered foundations and powders that didn't match my skin tone in an attempt to mask my darkness. It's important to note, very important to note, that none of these people were trying to hurt me. These were all people, family members, who cared about me and loved me so much, they were trying to look out for my best interests. Yet because of these pressures, my own face never fit my idea of what it is to be beautiful. And this affected my self-perception growing up. I felt like my color was a flaw, and it was limiting me in my life. Not only was it limiting me, it was defining me. I fell victim to colorism. Now, what exactly is colorism? This is a relatively new social issue. It's a term that was coined in the 1980s to describe discrimination based on skin tone. This is different from racism, as colorism occurs even within racial groupings. People with darker skin are seen as less prestigious. And this attribution extends beyond simply what is considered attractive by a society and reaches as far as diminishing a person's character or potential purely on the basis of his or her skin tone. This is an issue that we see on an international scale. We saw it in Africa during slave trade, where people with darker skin were ascribed a lower monetary value than people who had lighter skin. It was seen when people with darker skin were required to carry identity documents in an attempt to decrease the mobility of the lower classes. In the modern day, skin tone is still a large determinant in social class. We saw it in India, thanks to the caste system, where people of higher castes generally had lighter skin tones than the people with lower castes, who were toiling outdoors. Even today, in matrimony sites, before they ask about a girl's education, background, or economic status, they request a bride with fair skin. Throughout Asia, we see this in our mythologies and our fairy tales. The good guys, the heroes, the princes, the princesses, they all have beautiful fair skin. But the bad guys, the villains, they're often portrayed as having dark skin. Now we come to the United States. You'd think that a country where people come from all walks of life, every race, every religion, every culture is represented. Yet we still fall victim to colorism. A 2015 study by Marcus Rangel and Daniel Kreisman showed that darker-skinned Black Americans fared worse in key metrics than their lighter-skinned counterparts. These measures included marriage, self-confidence rates, jail time, and pay. These metrics determine quality of life, and our darker-skinned members were faring significantly worse. It was seen again with the implementation of this brown paper bag test. The brown paper bag test used to be used to determine entrance into social organizations. You hold a brown paper bag up against an aspiring member's face, and if their skin is lighter than this bag, they were allowed entry into the organization. If it was darker, they were denied on the basis of being too dark. I failed this test.
That's where I'm going to cut it off now. Watching that, I absolutely can relate. I watched the entire TED Talk and absolutely can share the link for everyone to watch. And it does go across different cultures. I think some of the folks on this Zoom know I have a twin sister. We are fraternal, so we actually don't look very much alike. I'm absolutely more lighter skinned than she is. We were at a summer program and it was for minority students. This was in high school, tons of Black students, tons of Hispanic students as well, obviously with varying skin tones and colors. We went to Claire's, which when you're in high school, Claire's is just so great, so premium. So we went to Claire's we're at a Carnegie Mellon summer program. So it was at the waterfront, if you're familiar with Pittsburgh. And there was probably about 20 of us in the store. And we're shopping. We're at an engineering summer program, by the way. So we're all very much nerds. Like we're not trying to steal anything, just throwing that out there. And we go through and I'm shopping by one of the girls who is Mexican, and she very much could pass for a white individual, as well as another female from the program who was lighter skinned. She was half white and half Cuban. And there were some other lighter skinned Hispanic individuals shopping in the store as well. And there were some darker skinned folks. My twin, I would say she looks more Hispanic, but absolutely more of an olive tone than I do. The police were called on us because there were too many of us in the store. There were other people shopping, other teenagers as well, but we needed to leave. What was interesting is that I was not asked to leave. The other girls, all the lighter skinned individuals were not asked to leave, but all of the darker skinned people, which for me was just crazy because literally my twin sister was in the group that was asked to leave. And then within their group, so there was about 20 of us, and it was probably about, it was a little over half, so maybe 12 were asked to leave the store. The rest of us were fine to go on. They didn't even address us, didn't talk to us. We were not part of the problem, yet we were all in the store looking for really cheap jewelry because it was Claire's. So they had that group of 12 leave and then forced them. They said there were still too many of them. They needed to separate. So they had to walk on separate sides of the street because it was, obviously too intimidating, these future engineers and scholars. And obviously the rest of us in there, the 8 of us, we left the store as well. But it was really shocking to me I had never been in a position where it was so clear that I was privileged because I was light skinned. I could pass. I was less intimidating than literally my twin sister. So it was really disheartening experience for me to go through. We absolutely remember that day, how we felt. And we were like 16 years old. And I absolutely throughout my life have seen the benefits and almost light skin privilege that I can experience in comparison to my, I have a brother that's adopted. He's more of a brown skin and he's a male. So he absolutely runs into obstacles and issues that I just don't see. When preparing for this, I did some research on the TED Talk. Obviously, she spoke to some of the stats, but dark-skinned women are 3 times more likely than their light-skinned counterparts to be suspended from school. I'm like, oh, it just starts so young. Dark-skinned drivers, no shock, are more likely to be arrested and pulled over. And I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with the colorism, say, study with dolls. So basically, African-American, even darker skinned girls.
Can you see me, Miss Lynn? Miss Lynn, can you see me?
Yes,
Oh.
sorry. Oh.
Yeah. So they're given dolls, baby dolls, and these are young girls. I highly recommend, and we can share the link as well to look up this, but they're asked questions, and there's a light-skinned and a darker skinned doll. And they say, which one is prettier? Pick the light-skinned one. And it doesn't matter if the individual who's the child is lighter skinned or darker skinned. They always pick the lighter skinned is pretty. They say, which one is bad? They point to the darker skinned one. Which one is ugly? The darker skinned one. So it's at such a young age that we instill these really unfortunate biases. And it almost, to me, it pings folks within a specific race against each other to say, like, light skin is better. I would also say, is light skin better because it's closer to being white? And is that the ultimate goal? And that's very disheartening for sure, in my opinion. So I just wanted to share some personal experiences. I'd love to open it up to the group if there's any similar situations that you have seen or have experienced yourself, because it's just a very unfortunate state that we have.
I know for me, I'll speak. I used to live in Tallahassee, Florida, and I work for this travel agency. And one day, one of my coworkers, he asked me, "What are you?" And I'm like, "A girl?" And he said, "No, like, what are you?" And I'm like, I don't know what it is that you're asking me. I said, "American?" And he was like, "No, what are you?" And I said, and so I finally said, what are you, what are you getting at? And he said, "The way you speak. You don't speak like other Black people." So that obviously I was something else. And that always stuck with me. And he and I were cool because, number one, he had the courage to ask the way that he did. But I found that a lot. I went to deliver tickets one day back when we delivered tickets. And when I went in and I said, "Hi, I'm Lynn from Adventures in Travel," they were like, "Really?" Again, because they perceived I was someone else based on my speech. And I guess that was, I spoke white in their world. So that's my experience.
Yeah, absolutely can appreciate that. My brother worked in Tallahassee, Florida. He went for a little bit. He's in Gainesville now. But yeah, he's had some interesting experiences there for sure.
I feel like colorism is so like prevalent in Asian culture. It's like insane. I mean, like I'm speaking as a South Asian, like Chinese American. Like I've grown up and people often like dismiss it as just like a beauty standard that, oh, pale skin, like they cite like historically, like if you were tanner, you were probably in the working class. But like this, but I mean, nowadays it's obviously not, that's probably not the case. And they keep this just like ideal that like if you're tanner, it's like a working class, you're lower class. It's definitely like looked down upon, and like they still dismiss it as a beauty standard, but I feel like there's a lot more behind that now. Like even as recently, I was talking to like another like an older Chinese woman, and she had like talked about like she was bashing an entire race, and then on top of that, just was like, and the plus their skin's so dark. Uh, so it's just like association of like all these negative um, connotations with just being a shade darker. And then also you see that in like the beauty industry. I know like the TED Talk talked about that. Like in Asian beauty, there's like no shade range, absolutely no shade range. And like in Korea, that's the Korea and all these South Asian countries, like that's the beauty standard to be pale. And then all and now in um the beauty industry in America too, the like the shade um, range is oftentimes just like so pale and so limited that it's like, I don't know, people of darker skin tones just never feel like seen or heard or like cared to. Yeah.
Yeah, Sarah, I just wanted to bring up a point. I remember growing up in the 90s, it was more prevalent, like teenage, like, so for those who don't know, teenage girls, we used to read like 17 and like these, fashion magazines. And I remember when you'd have pop stars on there, when Destiny's Child came out and Beyonce, and I remember they had an article, they were showing how much magazines would whiten or lighten her skin tone, or like Naomi Campbell, who was a Black supermodel, like, and they'd show comparisons back in the, I mean, they're still doing it today, but it was more prevalent back then where they'd lighten their skin tone on purpose to make them seem lighter than what they were because yeah, the standard, and I think it is proximity to whiteness, with this ideal of lighter skin being more beautiful, or the standard, which is, I don't know, ridiculous, because there are a lot of beautiful Black men and women with darker skin tone, especially I feel like it's slowly becoming more common now, which I appreciate. So
I'll just build upon what Sarah just said. If you go to Asian countries, particularly like East Asia, during summertime, you'll see even on like sunshine days, the girls always have an umbrella. The reason is because they do not want to get any suntan, because the suntan is Sarah mentioned, deemed like a secondary class. You work in the countryside, you're a physical worker, and just people have a natural kind of prejudice or bias against you. I like the TED Talk and talk about the colorism, because this is a new term for me. It's kind of different from racism. However, I do feel like there's some at the end that there's still some kind of racism out there, because there's just like you have a natural profile, say, okay, dark skin means secondary class, people don't want to get to that low class. I think although two different terms, but there's some commonalities out there.
I have some students on that I'd love to hear from, guys. Valerie, Rodemael, Murdy.
Okay, I'll talk.
Speak up.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay. So, I'm gonna say in the Haitian community, it's kind of similar about like, oh my God, Miss Lynn, you cut your hair. Okay, sorry. In the Haitian community, there's a bunch of products for lightening skin. Like there's this one I know, it just bleaches your skin basically, and it's like sold in the beauty store that's owned by, actually he's it's owned by an Indian man, and he like sells, like he'll like promote it. He'll be like, yeah, this one is really good. This one's really good whenever you walk in. And it's like a bleaching, it's just to bleach your skin to make you lighter. And honestly, I think it's also a cultural thing, because being lighter in Haiti is like, um it's like it's not better, but that's what they see as better. And it's, I think they've like progressed from, like they've moved away from that a little bit, but it's still kind of where lighter skin is better skin.
Murdy, Rodamael, your thoughts?
They're like, we're not ready.
It's okay. Yeah, if they don't want to be put on the spot, that's okay too. Or you can chat, write something in chat.
Like, no, they're going to, they'll talk at one point. Yeah, I put in the chat, there's actually an organization called Beauty Well, and it specifically talks about that. So Sarah, thank you for bringing it up. It's actually based out of St. Paul, and it's an organization that's, I can even share my screen so you can see the website. I was really impressed with what they have. So it's Beauty Wellness Talk podcast, you know, focusing on ending skin lightening practices. It's really scary and just really sad if we think about, there's this huge industry to fix something that isn't really broken, but we've conditioned ourselves to say, no, light skinned is better, even at that young age with that doll, like, nope, this one's bad, this is good. Because there's no natural reason for people to need to lighten their skin. One of my really good friends, she's Indian, and I would call her, I don't know, like a caramel brown. She said that she remembers when she was younger, she would try to, as much as possible, like stay out of the sun. And she said she would even not play outside because she did not want to get any darker. She would put different products on her skin, and some of it she just, kids, right? They don't understand things. So she would just eat light foods, thinking that would make her. So I was like, not the smartest, but okay. But just that she was so, like, her goal was, I want to be lighter. I want to be lighter. That'll make me beautiful. It's really sad. I mean, she went about it the wrong way. But I mean, the out of the sun, yeah, but the eating rice and white bread is not gonna make you a little chunkier, I guess. All the carbs, but it's so sad that there's an industry geared toward, you know, getting all of those folks money, and it could potentially, you know, those chemicals that you're putting on your body could potentially damage your skin, and there's no real benefit like that.
Yeah, this concept is very confounding to me, but I grew up with it. I mean, if you're in the Black community, this is not a concept that you're unfamiliar with. You know it from as early as you can remember, and it kind of is a thing that is hard to explain. But like, light-skinned people are viewed as better, but then the dark-skinned people don't like that, because then they think the light-skinned people think they're better, and so there's kind of a rivalry kind of a thing, and it's very odd. And some people act it out. There are some people that, you know, you can tell that they walk around with their heads up, that are very fair-skinned, and they think they're better, and all of that kind of stuff. So I kind of fell into that. I was like, I never saw myself as light-skinned, and I was always like, you know, that's elitist, and that was my mindset. I remember one time I had a cousin, his name's Dedrick, and he and I both were the biggest kids in our grade. We were both really big. Obviously, we're both Black. He was my cousin. And I remember one day someone was saying, you know, could they confuse us? I can't remember what the discussion was, but Dedrick said, I don't know how they confuse us, you know? Yeah, we're both the same size, but you're light-skinned. And that was the first time, like, I ever considered that maybe people would consider me as light-skinned. I didn't like that. I didn't like it, because it's again, it's a weird thing to explain, but it's kind of like some brothers like LeBron, they don't like Steph Curry. They like a little bit more now, but at first, when he started really getting good and challenging LeBron, like a lot of brothers didn't like that because it made a lot of darker skinned guys feel like, we're losing somehow. It's like, we're all the attention now is going to again be focused. It had nothing to do with Steph. It was all about this colorism thing. It creates division. All of these things create division. It's really what it comes down to. And so Tommy mentioned, so I did a lot of research on this. Like, did this happen because of the slave trade? And it certainly became more standardized around racism along with colorism. But actually, colorism does go back much further. And it really comes down to if you are well off, if you're a king, you're a queen, you don't have to work. So you can stay inside and your skin gets fair because you're not outside. It's that simple. If you have to work, you're outside and you get dark. So that was there, but it got accentuated when colonialism happened because it was a way to divide people. If you ever try to study kind of because in America, it was the 1 drop rule, right? If you have 1 drop of African blood, 1%, a half of 1%, you're Black. But in the Spanish colonies and in France, in the French colonies, they had grades of Blackness. And why did they do that? Because they had a lot of Native American people that they were still working with. And they had a lot of men who didn't have wives. So they were, making babies and all these things. But they wanted to not have these people unite against the minority. So they used this idea of, they already had this colorism thing. So they created classes. I can't remember the name, but they had classes of people. And of course, if you're white, you're here. If you're African, you're here. And then all the different shades were in the middle. So people tried to climb the ladder of shades. Not so much because they were racist, because they were trying to better their lives. There's a famous painting in Brazil where there's an African grandmother and she's sitting there with a smile on her face because she had a biracial daughter, and the biracial daughter is like kind of like Blake's complexion, like coffee, or Adrian Lynn's complexion. But then she had a white husband, and then the granddaughter is white. So the African grandmother is smiling and looking at the granddaughter because she was able to see the whole transition occur on this colorism spectrum. And it's things like that that are so poisonous in our society that we just have to keep fighting against them. And so I'm really happy to, see, I saw the trailer for, what's it called? Black Panther 2. Black Panther 2. No, Hope is, that Nope is good. But no, Black Panther, my son he's really big in the Marvel universe. He sent me the trailer. But if you look at the trailer, I mean, they're really doing a good job. It's a Black director, and it's really about dark-skinned people that are being promoted. I think, there's several, of course, Chadwick Boseman in the past, but I can't wait for that movie because that's what we need, is to continue to promote from that end of the spectrum. But this is a really great topic. I'm just glad that you guys are talking about it.
And it's funny, Donnie, that you mentioned that, because I don't know if you remember, Mavera used to call me her little yellow cat because I was the light one. And that's what she called me. Which is disturbing.
Yes,
but
that's our great grandmother.
She was proud, right, that she had this, what she called this little yellow cat.
Anytime one of her grandchildren brought a baby that was lighter complected, that's what we got a yellow cat. We got us a yellow cat. I love yellow cats, which was because she was dark. She was darker skinned. But it's kind of like that Brazil painting. It's a famous painting if you ever want to Google it. I can't remember the name of it. But if you Google it, I can't remember the name, but it's a famous painting there because that's a lot of South America and Central America and the Caribbean. That's the mindset.
Go ahead, Blake.
Oh, sorry. I love both your comments because I know I am very light skinned. I'm the lightest skinned person in my family. I get it. But I hate it when I was dating in college and after college, when guys would say they would only date light-skinned girls, that's a good way for me to stop dating you. Like I am so like, in my heart, I'm so much darker and black because I'm just like, Black people are beautiful. Every single shade is beautiful. And the fact that you just think I'm pretty, or like a big reason why I think I'm pretty is because I'm light skinned. I'm like, I did nothing to do that. Like, you know, I'd rather have you like my personality. I'd rather, so it's a big thing. So it's funny down the hall, you're like light skin, you know, like that. I do the same thing, like, even though I know I am very light skinned, but I don't think it's not fair. And it says a lot of people if they say like, that's a really good trait that I have. And I'm like, yep, we're not meant to be together. Yes, very superficial, just like, I don't know.
And believe me, there are a lot of people who are African American, who are Black, who are Asian, you know, who are Indian, who do not play in the sun and do not let their kids play in the sun. You go to the beaches in Key West. There's a reason why a lot of us don't swim real good, because we were not at the beach that much. Especially once we grew up a little bit, you did not see a lot of brothers at the beach. Why? Because they don't want to get dark. You know, so I was always like, okay, I'm not down with that. I don't, you know, like I said, I was surprised when Dedrick said, you're light skinned. I was like, no, I'm not. I was thinking about, what is he talking about? You know, but that just goes to show you, I'm like a brown shade, but it's this grading that we got to get away from.
Donzel, I'm really happy you brought up Black Panther, one, because I'm wearing my Black Panther shirt today with, the two Black women warriors, which are fantastic representation. But two, it made me think of the fact that with social media now, it gives the opportunity for the public to bring more awareness to this issue. And the one thing I thought of with respect to movies is a few years ago, they did a Nina Simone biopic, and the actress they picked for Nina Simone is, I can't remember her name. She's in Guardians of the Galaxy, and she's lighter skinned, and there was a huge outcry.
I think it's Zoe Saldana. Is that her name?
Yes, and she had to wear, it was basically almost like people were upset because one, Nina Simone was darker skinned, and the actress, they actually had her wear darker makeup to make her look darker than she was. In order to play the role. And a lot of people were upset that, one, they did that, and two, that, you know, why they didn't have a broader search for an actress who could play the role, but also had a more representation with darker skin like Nina Simone. And I remember they had so many other actresses, they said, you could have picked any one of these people, and they chose this actress. And I remember hearing about that. And I think as much as social media can be a bad thing, I also think it's gives voice to people who don't normally have a platform to raise awareness about stuff like that. So
Jenny, I don't know if you know this too, but like they have swapped out like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. They had Aunt Viv, and then she was darker skinned, and they swapped her out for a lighter skinned person. And then My Wife and Kids had it was the daughter, and I think her name was Claire, and they swapped her out for a lighter skinned actress, like for no reason. It just looks like so that they could have a more appealing, attractive character. Very disappointing.
I also remember there's this thing in the Black community that a lot of darker skinned girls have experienced, where somebody will say, oh, you're really pretty for a Black girl. Somebody thinks that they're, giving you saying something really good about you. And right, they're insulting you by saying, you're pretty for a Black girl, because typically I guess Black girls aren't pretty. And yeah.
And especially dark-skinned Black girls, right? I told Jenny this before. I went to college with, and Donzel, if you remember Carol Pritchett or Carol Uda, her and I went to Ohio State together. She's been gone for a while, but when we were at Ohio State, we had our group of chemical engineers that were really very close. And Carol's Nigerian, She's much darker skinned than I am. We were the only two people of color in our little group of friends. There was like 11 of us. And there's this white girl, Brittany, not really my friend anymore, but she told me in front of several of our friends that she only finds light-skinned Black people attractive. And I said, oh, but, and because then we have a common friend that like we're very close with and we hang out every single day. So I said, really, well, what about Carol? And this is where I thought I gave her an opportunity to like let me back up, but instead she doubled down and said, yeah, I just don't think that dark-skinned Black people are attractive. And I just couldn't believe that she would say that. I'm like, that's just so rude. That is our best friend that we spend time with every single day. And she just felt justified, like, yeah. And I didn't have the conversation with her. I just kind of let it slip. But I just thought yeah, so you think I'm more attractive because I'm light-skinned. That's it. That's my only qualifier. And it's because I look more like you and white people. So that's why Carol is not pretty to you. And to your point, Donzel, my friend Carol, she'll say, yeah, well, if we were going to go to the pool, and she's like, I'm going to go shopping. She goes, why would I go swimming? I was like, oh, it's going to be so much fun. She's like, so I can get darker. And it's just so unfortunate because it's something that I just don't have to even consider or worry about. If any, yeah, it's like if I went on a walk today, I'm a little bit darker, but it's just not a factor for me. And I know that no one is going to treat me differently if I get, a shade or two darker, but she knows regardless if she's out in the sun or not, that people are going to treat her differently and not really well.
Yeah, there's two other comments, and it looks like you got a couple of the students on that you might want to ask. But one thing I was going to say is the other thing that confounded me about this growing up is how a lot of white people will come to Key West to get tanned and to get darker. But then if you're darker and you're Black, it's bad, and you got to get lighter. The whole thing made no logical sense to me. And it still doesn't. That where we're going, it just made. Now I will say again, in Asia, it's not like that. People are out of the sun. Like Tommy said, in China, man, people are walking around with those umbrellas. But in the U.S., I mean, getting tan is like it's like this is great. I'm beautiful now. Well, then why isn't my sister beautiful? Why isn't my cousin beautiful? I don't understand that. But the other thing I think that's really interesting is. There's a group of people called the Nilotic people of Africa. And these are really the darkest people some of the darkest people in the world. There's some folks in India that are actually pretty dark too, but the Nilotic people are some of the darkest and the tallest. And they're kind of nomads, and they call them Nilotics because they live along the Nile. They tend to be cattle herders. But if you look at these people, they're some of the most beautiful people I've ever seen. I mean, their features are like chiseled features. They're tall and they're very, very dark. And it just, again, goes to show when you look at the continent of Africa, a lot of people just think Black people. There's diversity in the continent of Africa, just like there's diversity in the continent of Asia and Europe. Their people look a lot different. And so if you want to see some really unique looking, dark-skinned people who are beautiful people, try to just Google Nilotic people of Africa. It would really, really, to me, it was really cool.
Murdy, did you have something to say? I saw you turned your mic off a minute ago.
No, I was gonna say, like, going back to like where they popularized like skin lightening products. Like since a young age, I've always been a dark skinned girl. I've been made fun for it a lot of times. Like every time I would go back home to visit family, they would be like, "Oh, you've gotten so much darker. Use this cream so you could get lighter and be pretty like the other girls." And to me, that just like brings out so much insecurities in so much girls. Like I'm not the only one. And it's not just in other countries too, and it's in America too. Like you could tell and you could feel when people think you're like, how do I say this? Like there's they give you backhanded compliments like, oh, you're so pretty for a dark skinned girl. Oh, so and so and so and so. And it's just like, why can't you just say you look good, you know? Why can't you just say, give me a real compliment and just leave it at that? But people always seem to mention my skin color, and it's just like, it's tiring, and it's kind of sad also. I don't know.
Can you turn on your camera so we can see how beautiful you are?
No, I'm good. I just got off
Yes,
of
you
work.
are.
I look a mess.
She's absolutely
I look a
beautiful.
mess.
I was actually typing in the chat, trying to respond to Tommy's question, where he was asking about Michael Jackson. It was taking too long, but I think, again, I don't know Michael Jackson. I didn't know him, but if you look at him when he was growing up into what happened to him, I would say he had issues with being Black and having what he would call Black features. And so a lot of the surgeries and skin lightening and his hair, I think, had to do with that. I think it did have a lot to do with that. And I think Tommy says it's common. It used to be, if you go back into the 1950s, 40s, 50s, in that range, it was common, and maybe even earlier than that, it was common to see Black men straighten their hair. They had this thing called the conch, and where it was a chemical compound that would straighten a Black man's hair, and then they would like slick it back, kind of like if you look at the old movies back then, like the white guys did. So they would wear their hair like that. So if you look back at some of those old performers back in those days, their hair is all slicked back. So they were trying to assimilate, to be white. And I'm sure there were things they did to try to lighten their skin. But in the 1960s, it started to change when Black Power, when Malcolm X used to conk his hair. He changed when he went to prison and converted to Islam. And so a lot of that was rejected in this Black pride. Black is beautiful started to be the theme in rejecting assimilation and kind of whiteness. But there's still pockets of that. There's no question about that there's still pockets of that today for a lot of reasons. And I get you, I would bet the people that are using skin creams, which I'm sure there's some that are in my family that I know they're sure that the ones that are doing that kind of thing, they probably wouldn't say they're trying to be white or assimilate to be white. It's probably more along the lines of, they may feel prettier. They may feel better about themselves. So it's still back to this inner damage that's been done that, I don't know if that was Valerie that was talking about, where it's continue to be pounded to them that the darker you are, it's not good. And somehow trying to change that. So I don't know if that makes sense, Tommy, but that's my take on it.
Thanks, Alonzo, for the explanation. Makes sense.
I also remember like growing up, and okay, I'm going to be 63 soon. So, okay, I'm just telling my age. So, but I remember, when we watched TV, what we saw on TV. And I remember vividly going in and getting a white towel and putting on my hair so that I could have blonde hair. And I would swing it around like I saw the white girls on TV doing, because that's all I saw. And everybody that I knew did that, because we wanted, that's what we saw, and that was what was pretty to us. And so I think, a lot of that's probably carried from back then. So it's weird, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things is I was thinking about, like, what action can we take? I know we've talked about this before, like representation matters, but it's also what kind of representation. So if you have children, I highly recommend, like, if the same doll situation, to have a spectrum, and don't shy away from, the dark skin Black doll. And then what's also important is how you describe that to a child. It's all these little things like, this is a beautiful baby, like that, and re-emphasizing things like that, so that they don't think and point, this is the bad one, this is the ugly one, this is the good one. So they have those positive associations.
I had posted something in the chat, and I was just curious, when this comes up in a conversation and how to best address when somebody makes a statement like that, especially with the role of ARC, and we're trying within our own communities, which for some of us who are white are mostly white communities, and what's a good way to respond when somebody makes a comment like that, to educate without maybe, to change minds without, I hate to say making white people feel bad because I hate having to tiptoe around it, but I feel like sometimes you gotta, I don't even know what the term is. When you talk to white people, sometimes you need to, in order to get them to change their mind, you have to be sort of gentle about your reprimanding racism. You know, if anybody has any thoughts or suggestions, I'd love to hear them.
I know for me, I always felt that if I were in mixed company, meaning, you know, maybe a white person said something that was offhand and there was another white person there, I always want the white person to speak up, because it always feels like if I'm going to speak up, number one, I'm emotional about it. So then I'm going to be labeled angry Black woman. Instead, be corrected by somebody that looks like you. I think it's a little better than you want me to come at you. I don't know. That's just my take. But if I have to, if you won't say anything, then I will. But again, I'm probably going to be more emotional than the other person. So if you're in a situation, I would ask that you speak up.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's also helpful to like ask why. Why do you think that? So I can think of an example at General Mills in the Covington plant, Donville. There was, and to be fair, he was a horrible employee. He ended up getting let go. But there was a brown-skinned Black man who was a PTM, and there was someone who reported to him who was a white male, and he basically said that he thought that he was a Hayes employee, which is our janitorial services, which didn't make sense because he was in engineering row, he was walking around, he didn't have, like, the Hayes employees had a uniform, it was separate from the Covington uniform. Like, why do you think that, like, it didn't make sense? I felt personally that he felt that way because he was a darker skinned Black man, like, heaven forbid. And it ended up being his boss, by the way, because this guy was in engineering. And I just asked, like, why do you think that? And then we had a somewhat decent conversation. He I think was a little uncomfortable, like, oh, well, I just, and tried to go really quickly. But there was no good reason for him to think that, unless it's like, oh, well, he's Black, so he must be a janitor. I do feel like people that are darker skinned, people do think, and we talked about it, like, they're out in the sun, they're lower class, do think that they're not as intelligent as people that are lighter skinned. And it just is like, okay, tell me why, because it makes no sense. And obviously they're not going to say, oh, well, because he's Black, oh, because it's like, they're not going to say that. So why? And they have no reason. So then I think it at least helps make them a little uncomfortable and gets them thinking differently.
I think for me, the action plan is just, don't be judgmental just because of, the color of skin, So I remember, several years ago before I joined ARC, I made some comments, which definitely, is very natural for me, but at this time, never even thought about that. I remember I watched the news, I saw some like, Black students, got like, some like math competition. Just, I said, wow, a Black student's got the like golden kind of a medal for that. The comments actually is not like out of like a bad intention, but it's almost good people intention say, okay, Black students can achieve higher academic standard. Actually, Sarah actually corrected me and say, hey, don't say that. This is really bad because you have some kind of a natural bias against the student just because of skin or color. How do you know that the Black student is not as smart and intelligent? So I think from then on, I kind of pay very attention to that. So never be judgmental just because of color of skin. So I think that's very important. And I think that's also important to influence my my friends, my relative. A lot of time just say, hey, look at the baby's picture. Oh, this baby is so white, it's so gorgeous, So hey, we should also jump on and say, you know what, your black baby can equally be beautiful, be lovely. So I think those are things that we should do. Just the influence, pay attention to, day-to-day conversation. Don't be judgmental just because of skin color.
Yeah, I like what Tommy said. I think us, especially, in a community where you have people of different shades, speaking more forcefully about the positives that you see. When you see, beautiful, dark-skinned women, make a comment about that. When you hear someone say something damaging or that's not good, say something about that. This happens a lot. We see white people don't hear these things. This happens a lot in the Black community. It really does. Where, oh my God, you see, he's black, man. He's black, blue, he's purple. I mean, that kind of thing, people say that kind of stuff. And, we have to stand up to that. And this has been going on for during slavery, this was happening. Malcolm X talked about it a lot in terms of, the different views that he had about this. It's something that we have to speak out about. Like Tommy said, we need to be very purposeful about talking about the positive, people who are out there, like the Nilotic people, making sure people know who they are. Talking about, I can't remember her name, but one of those actresses, a warrior that's on that T-shirt Jenny's wearing. She's on the Walking Dead is where
Yes.
she plays Michonne. I think she's freaking awesome. She's beautiful. She's tough. I don't know her name as an actress, but
I know. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah. But that I think we have to talk more like that. Is what I think would be very, very helpful for all of us, especially in the communities of color, whether you're, you call yourself of African descent or Asian, like Tommy was talking about, or from the Caribbean or South America. I think this is much more of a problem in our communities of color. That's just the truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I was going to say, and try and support, even though I'm just thinking of like our Vice President Kamala Harris. I remember she was getting a lot of flack too, because she's half Asian. And so some people in the Black community were like, oh, she's not a Black woman. And because she's a lighter skin tone. And it's just like, okay, well, and as a white person, I couldn't understand what the heck they meant by that. But I mean, obviously it's still an ongoing issue, and, recognizing that and, combating that too for people, not just, I guess, all shades, making sure that everybody's treated with respect.
That's a perfect example. I mean, that is a perfect example of the kind of stuff that's perfect.
Yeah, and I think I want to get back to Donzel, the comment, because I know we only have a few minutes left. The comment that you said about separation. So like Jenny, what you just said brought it back to that. And it's really unfortunate because Black people, minorities need to stick together, and this is a way to separate us. And just to be clear, people that say, oh, only light-skinned girls are pretty and stuff like that, they still think that white people are better than light-skinned people. So it's just like, yeah, you're better. Like, okay, you can be a slave that works inside the house, but you're still a slave. So to separate us from the slaves that work out in the field, that's not helping us as a community. And then now, obviously, we're not enslaved people, but if we're separating, we're not doing ourselves any favors and any justice. But it seems very, very much beneficial to white people for us to separate and whatnot within ourselves, and it's obviously very unfortunate. So I do want to be cognizant of time. It is for sure. It's almost my bedtime here because I am in Eastern time zone. But I really appreciate everyone's open and candid conversation. Murdy, when you spoke up, I really appreciate your personal stories, and Black is beautiful, and all shades. And I think it's really unfortunate that even within your family, you hear comments. Sarah talking about in the Asian community, one of my best friends is Chinese, and she absolutely has said things about the colorism within her culture as well. And yeah, I think the sentiment, Tommy, I like your note. All colors are beautiful. That picture, that is crazy. Yeah, that's unfortunate. But I think we should all think about what we can do to embrace the conversations and stand up for what's right when it comes to colorism, and make sure that we have an impact to the younger generation. Sarah, I love that your challenge to Tommy. That's we need more of that. And I have no idea, Jenny, what our next event is, but so thankful for everyone to join today.
Yeah, no, thank you, everybody. Our next event will be in October. We do every other month. And I think next session, Erica is going to be leading a discussion, I think on food insecurity. And I think she's hoping to get a guest. I think she's a Black farmer, a Black farm owner, I believe, or anyway, we're working on it, but it's going to be on food with harvest time in October. So look forward to that. But and also check out the resources page. We have some great resources for July, some interesting highlights of different well-known or maybe not well-known to you individuals in the Black community. So check that out as well, and keep doing the work, and we're here to support everybody and help you further anti-racism in our communities. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
Tommy.
you.
Thanks.
Great job. Thank you.
I love your haircut. It looks
Yeah,
great.
beautiful.
I
Great.
like it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Great job, Blake. All right. Stop video.